I had barely set my boxes down when the storm hit. Not the kind that darkens the sky and rattles windows, but the human kind. The kind that comes with pressed polo shirts, shiny name tags, and an attitude that says we own you now. The U-Haul was still parked crooked in my gravel drive, my golden retriever, Scout, sniffing at the tires, when 3 SUVs rolled up one after the other. They parked side by side like they were sealing off an escape route. Out stepped the cavalry, 4 men, 2 women, all wearing the same smug confidence. One man carried a clipboard. Another had a binder so thick it looked like he was preparing for trial. At their center was her, Marjorie Turner, the president of the Homeowners Association. Thin frame, sharp chin, and a pair of oversized sunglasses that reflected back my own confusion. She didn't walk so much as she marched up my lawn. Not a word of welcome, not a neighborly smile. Just a clipboard clutched to her chest like it was the Constitution itself. "Mr. Walker," she said, voice clipped and formal, though I'd never introduced myself. I squinted at her. Yeah, that's me. I'm Marjorie Turner, HOA president." She tilted her head, motioning at the others behind her like generals revealing their troops. "We need to have a word. Now." I laughed lightly, trying to cut the tension. "Well, I'd offer you a beer, but I haven't even unpacked my fridge yet." No smiles. Not even a smirk. Marjorie pointed past me, toward the water. My property stretched down to the edge of Lake Prescott, a sprawling blue jewel tucked behind rows of pines. It was the very reason I'd bought the place, a fixer-upper with peeling paint and a sagging porch. But the lake made it heaven. My heaven. "You see, Mr. Walker," she began, "that lake is a shared community feature, and we need to discuss access rights immediately." I frowned, shifting the weight of a box in my arms. Shared community feature? Last I checked, I bought this place fair and square. That deed includes the lakefront. The man with the binder stepped forward, flipping it open like he was about to cross-examine me. "The HOA maintains recreational use of the lake for all residents in this neighborhood. Docks, fishing, boating, those are governed by association bylaws." I set the box down slowly, the words digging in deeper than I expected. "So you're telling me, that lake, my lake, you're saying it belongs to you?" "Not belongs," Marjorie corrected, her lips curling in satisfaction. "But managed, controlled, regulated." It was like they'd rehearsed this ambush, descending before I'd even set up a bed to sleep in. I glanced past them, over the ridge of roofs and manicured lawns that made up Pinecrest Meadows. Perfectly trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, 2-car garages lined up like teeth. It was Stepford, painted in beige siding and HOA pride. I swallowed down the irritation boiling up my throat. "Well, I hate to break it to you, but my lawyer was pretty clear. That lakefront is mine. Property line runs right into the water, dock included." Marjorie finally removed her sunglasses, fixing me with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. "That dock is ours. The HOA built it, maintains it, and leases it for community use. It is not your personal toy." Her words echoed, and suddenly the pieces clicked. They didn't just want access. They wanted control. Those docks, they were the HOA's pride. The place where the whole community launched their paddleboards, hosted summer barbecues, tied up their boats. And now, those docks were standing on my land. Scout barked, breaking the silence, and I realized my jaw had locked tight. I forced a chuckle, though my chest burned. "So let me get this straight. You storm over here, first day I move in, demanding the lake. But you didn't realize. I own the ground under your precious docks." A flicker of unease passed over the group. The man with the binder cleared his throat, stammering something about community agreements, but I barely heard him. My pulse was pounding in my ears. For months, I'd dreamed about this moment, escaping the chaos of city life, trading sirens for crickets, concrete for pine trees. This was supposed to be peace. My peace. And in less than an hour, the HOA had declared war. "Look," I said finally, voice low, steady. "I'm not trying to pick a fight. But don't mistake me. I didn't buy this place to hand over my lake to a bunch of clipboard warriors." The group shifted uneasily. Marjorie's lips pressed into a thin line. She raised her chin like a queen addressing a disobedient subject. Mr. Walker, I suggest you read the bylaws before you embarrass yourself. You'll find you have fewer rights here than you imagine. And with that, she turned sharply on her heel, the others following like soldiers retreating after a skirmish. The SUVs rumbled to life and pulled away, leaving dust swirling in the driveway. I stood frozen, staring out at the water shimmering in the afternoon sun. My lake, their docks. The war line had been drawn. Scout whined at my side, tail low, sensing my tension. I crouched to scratch behind his ears, whispering, "Guess it's just you and me now, buddy. Welcome to Pinecrest." The lake rippled with the breeze, innocent and calm, as if it didn't know it had just become the prize in a battle I hadn't asked for. But one thing was already clear. If the HOA wanted to fight over my lake, they were about to find out I had more leverage than they ever expected. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee drifted from my new kitchen, mixing with the damp scent of pine rolling in off the lake. I sat at the worn oak table, boxes still stacked like cardboard skyscrapers around me, staring at the papers I'd pulled from the folder marked closing documents. The property survey, the deed, the county's stamped approval. The lines were crystal clear. My land stretched to the waterline, wrapping around the curve of Lake Prescott like a cupped hand. And right there, 3 docks, all 3 built squarely on my soil. I leaned back, rubbing the back of my neck. Scout padded over, tail wagging softly, his brown eyes begging for a morning walk. I gave him a scratch, but didn't move. My stomach churned with a mix of nerves and defiance. I hadn't even unpacked my toothbrush, and the HOA had already tried to carve off a piece of what I'd paid for. "Not gonna happen," I muttered. By 9 a.m., the neighborhood was awake. Garage doors yawned open, kids biked in little packs, and sprinklers ticked back and forth across manicured lawns. The air carried that distinct suburban hum, the sound of order, routine, and silent judgment. When I stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, I felt eyes on me. Curtains shifted. A man across the street gave a stiff nod before climbing into his SUV. A woman jogging past slowed, offered a thin smile, then picked up speed like she'd brushed too close to trouble. Word had traveled fast. I didn't have to wonder how. By late afternoon, there was a flyer taped to my door. Scout barked until I ripped it off. The bold header screamed, "Urgent HOA meeting, lake usage dispute." The meeting was scheduled for that evening at the Pinecrest Meadows Community Center. My name, Daniel Walker, was printed right in the middle of the notice, underlined twice. Like I was the villain in some local play. I stared at the paper until my fist crumpled it. So that was their move. Quick. Public. An ambush disguised as procedure. That evening, I parked my truck outside the community center, Scout whining in the passenger seat. "Not this time, buddy," I said, giving him a pat. "This one's mine." Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sterile glow. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, and at its head sat Marjorie, poised like a judge. To her right and left, board members flanked her, stacks of papers in front of them. Behind them, rows of folding chairs filled with neighbors, whispering like spectators waiting for a trial to begin. The whispers died when I walked in. "Mr. Walker," Marjorie said smoothly, gesturing to a chair at the far end of the table. "Thank you for coming." I sat, feeling every eye in the room trace my movements. Marjorie clasped her hands. "As you all know, we're here to discuss an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding the community's lake access." Misunderstanding. My blood heated. One of the board members leaned forward, voice oily. "For decades, Lake Prescott has been enjoyed by all Pinecrest residents. The association has maintained the docks, funded improvements, and overseen safety measures. It is, in essence, the heart of our community." I let him finish before I spoke. My voice came out steady, but loud enough to carry. "No one's arguing the lake isn't beautiful. But let's be real clear here. The heart of your community sits on land that belongs to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marjorie's smile never wavered. "Mr. Walker, surely you don't intend to block your neighbors from enjoying what they've always had access to?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "What I intend is to protect what I paid for. You want to fish? Boat. Barbecue on those docks? Then maybe it's time you realize whose ground you're standing on. A murmur swept through the room, neighbors whispering sharp enough to cut the air. Some looked outraged. Others looked intrigued. A heavy-set man in the back stood, red-faced. We built those docks with our dues. Our money. I shot back without hesitation. You built them on my dirt. The room erupted. Voices overlapping, chairs scraping as people leaned forward, everyone wanting a piece of the fight. Marjorie slammed a gavel against the table, her thin frame trembling with fury. Order. The noise died, but the tension only thickened. Marjorie adjusted her glasses. Mr. Walker, if you continue down this path, the HOA will pursue every legal avenue to secure community rights. I strongly suggest you reconsider. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. And if you push me, I'll fence off the whole shoreline tomorrow. How's that for reconsidering? The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. Faces twisted in shock, some in fear, others in silent admiration. For the first time since moving in, I saw doubt flicker in Marjorie's eyes. The meeting adjourned in chaos, neighbors spilling into the parking lot, voices rising, arguments breaking out. Some sided with the HOA, clinging to tradition and Marjorie's iron grip. But others saw the truth. And as I stood in the lot under the buzzing streetlight, I realized something. This wasn't just about a lake anymore. It was about control, about standing up to a system that thrived on intimidation and compliance. Scout barked happily when I slid back into the truck, tail thumping against the seat. I scratched his head, staring out at the rows of identical houses. They wanted my lake, I whispered. But now they just woke up the wrong neighbor. And for the first time since I'd moved in, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the storm. The storm broke 3 days later. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the lake was supposed to be calm, a mirror reflecting the sky. Instead, the sound of hammers and power drills shattered the peace. Scout's frantic barking dragged me out onto the porch, coffee still steaming in my hand. Down by the shoreline, a half-dozen men in HOA polos were working like ants. Lumber stacked on the grass, power tools buzzing, fresh boards laid out on sawhorses. They weren't repairing the old docks. They were building a new one. On my land. I set the mug down so hard coffee splashed over the rim. My boots pounded the dirt path as I stormed down the hill, Scout racing at my side. The men barely looked up as I approached, their focus on drills, nails, and measuring tape. At the center of it all stood Marjorie, clipboard in hand, sunglasses flashing in the morning sun. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. Marjorie turned, her smile sharp and cold. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. We're addressing the lake access issue by constructing an updated dock system. The community approved it last night. On my property." My voice cracked with fury. "This is community land by practice," she said coolly. "Decades of use establish precedent. You'll find the courts agree." My fists clenched. Precedent doesn't trump a deed. "You're trespassing." The workers hesitated, tools pausing midair, eyes flicking nervously between us. But Marjorie's confidence didn't waver. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp in the breeze. "You don't want to fight us, Mr. Walker. You'll lose. We have money, lawyers, and the entire neighborhood on our side." I took a step forward, lowering my voice until it was a growl. "Lady, you picked the wrong guy to corner." Scout barked, his hackles raised. The men shifted uneasily. And that's when I played the card I'd been holding close. I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket, waving it like a flag of defiance. "You see this? This is the county's survey. These docks sit squarely on my land. You touch another board, I call the sheriff. Then I sue every single one of you for damages." Marjorie's smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. Empty threats. I jabbed a finger toward the shoreline. "Go ahead. Keep building. You'll find out how empty they are when a judge makes you pay me rent for every day those docks sit on my soil." The workers froze, drills in hand. One of them muttered, "Wait, what?" Another dropped his hammer with a loud clang. The air grew heavy with doubt. Marjorie's face flushed crimson. She snapped, "Keep working. Don't listen to him." But the men hesitated. One by one, they exchanged uneasy glances, until finally, a tall guy with a tool belt shook his head. I'm not getting dragged into a lawsuit. He tossed his gloves onto the pile of lumber. I'm out. The others followed, grumbling, packing up their gear. Within minutes, the construction site emptied, leaving Marjorie standing alone at the shoreline, clipboard trembling in her grip. I stepped closer, my voice calm but edged with steel. You came after me the day I moved in. You thought you owned me, owned this lake. But here's the truth. You've been standing on borrowed ground this whole time. My ground. Her lips quivered, but she held my gaze. You'll regret this. The HOA doesn't back down. I leaned in until we were inches apart. Neither do I. The silence stretched, broken only by the lap of waves against the half-finished dock. Marjorie spun on her heel, heels crunching against gravel, and stormed back up the hill toward her SUV. I stood there for a long time after she left, scalp pressed against my leg, the lake glittering like a secret ally. My pulse was still hammering, but deep inside, something shifted. For the first time, the fight didn't scare me. It fueled me. By the time the sun dipped low, I'd made my decision. I wasn't just going to defend my land. I was going to flip the script. The HOA thought they had power because of those docks. But if they wanted them so badly, I'd make sure they paid, literally. The next morning, a bold new sign greeted the neighborhood, planted firmly at the top of the hill leading to the water. Private property, dock access by permit only. And beneath that, in clean black letters, permits available through Daniel Walker. Contact for rates. By noon, half the neighborhood had seen it. By evening, my phone buzzed with the first text. What's this about dock permits? And just like that, the battle for the lake had shifted. This wasn't their war anymore. It was mine. The sign was gasoline on dry brush. By the next morning, the neighborhood was ablaze with rumors, outrage, and, most surprisingly, support. My phone lit up with messages that swung between fury and quiet admiration. Some residents accused me of holding the community hostage, threatening lawsuits, and ruining decades of tradition. Others sent cautious thumbs-up emojis, or whispered that someone needed to put Marjorie in her place long ago. I didn't respond. Not yet. I had a plan. That evening, as the sun sank behind the ridge and painted the lake gold, I sat at the dock with Scout at my side and a clipboard of my own balanced on my knee. The first knock on my door came just after 7. It wasn't Marjorie. It was a couple I hadn't met yet, mid-40s, tired eyes, and an apologetic smile. They stood awkwardly, shifting their weight. The man cleared his throat. Mr. Walker? We just wanted to ask what the permit fee would be. Our kids fish off that dock every weekend. I studied their faces, their nervousness. They weren't soldiers in Marjorie's army. They were neighbors, caught in the middle. I softened. Tell you what, for families who just want to fish or swim, there's no fee. Consider it free access. But bigger stuff, parties, boats, events, that comes with responsibility. And responsibility comes with a cost. The woman's shoulders sagged in relief. Thank you. Really. They left with gratitude in their eyes. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. Not for me. It was about flipping the power structure on its head. The next day, word spread fast. Half the neighborhood quietly thanked me. The other half seethed. And at the center of the fury was Marjorie. By Thursday night, the HOA called another emergency meeting. This time, I didn't wait for their summons. I walked straight into the community center with Scout trotting proudly at my heel, head high, eyes locked on Marjorie's throne at the head of the table. Gasps rippled as I strode down the aisle, carrying my own binder, thin, but packed with enough firepower to shake their little empire. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Mr. Walker, this is a closed session. I smirked. Not anymore. I slapped the deed and county survey down onto the polished wood. The echo cracked through the room like thunder. You've all been lied to. For years, your president built her power on docks she didn't even own. This, I tapped the paper, is proof. The ground those docks sit on. Mine. Which means every dollar of dues you paid for their upkeep. Mismanaged. Every barbecue, every boat launch, every so-called community event, on borrowed land. The room exploded in murmurs. Some angry, some stunned. Marjorie slammed her gavel. This man is grandstanding. He's twisting facts too. I cut her off. No, Marjorie. You twisted facts. You knew damn well those docks weren't HOA property. But you counted on fear and silence to keep everyone in line. Well, I'm not silent. And I'm sure as hell not afraid. I turned, sweeping my gaze across the crowd. Here's the deal, families. You'll always have access to the lake. Free. Kids can fish, couples can paddle, neighbors can swim. But this HOA? If you want to host events, collect fees, or pretend you run the shoreline, you'll pay me rent. Fair rent. Or you can build new docks somewhere else. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Then, like cracks in ice, voices broke through. He's right. Why should we pay dues if the HOA doesn't even own the land? She lied to us. Marjorie's face went pale, her grip on the gavel trembling. For the first time, the queen of Pinecrest Meadows looked small. I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. Your reign's over, Marjorie. This lake isn't your leverage anymore. It's mine. The vote to remove her wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. By the end of the night, Marjorie stormed out of the community center, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her legacy in tatters. When I walked out into the cool night air, Scout bounding ahead, a handful of neighbors stopped me. Some thanked me. Others just looked relieved, like a spell had finally broken. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. What I felt was something deeper. Peace. The kind I'd come here for. The kind I thought I'd lost the moment the HOA stormed my driveway. That night, I sat on the dock with a beer in hand, Scout curled up at my feet. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm, eternal, mine. And for the first time since moving in, I finally breathed easy. They had wanted my lake. But in the end, I'd taken their power. And that was a trade I'd make every time. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.